Not every secret is buried underground or locked behind blast doors. Some are hidden in plain sight. So today I'm counting down 15 amazing structures that were designed to hide something. Starting with number 15, a luxury hotel built to conceal a congressional doomsday base. Tucked away in the Allegheny Mountains of West Virginia is the Greenbrier Resort, an estate with a long history of hosting presidents, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. Hidden beneath all that southern charm and Georgian architecture lies one of the most secretive and ambitious Cold War structures ever conceived. It's known officially as Project Greek Island. The Greenbrier bunker remained hidden in plain sight for over 30 years, right beneath the feet of vacationers and hotel staff. It wasn't decommissioned until its existence was publicly exposed in 1992. The idea for this facility was born in the late 1950s, during a period when the US-Soviet tensions were at their peak. The Eisenhower administration initiated a series of continuity of government plans, and that included secure bunkers. The government approached Greenbrier's owners, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, and made a deal. The resort would expand, and beneath that expansion, a secret bunker would be constructed to house over 1,100 people, senators, representatives, and their essential staff. To keep the facility a secret and operational, a team of employees from a dummy company called Forsyth Associates posed as television repair technicians. Their real job was to maintain the bunker and test all the systems. Even the Greenbrier staff were largely unaware of what lay beneath them. The structure's existence was a secret even to its intended occupants. That secrecy held until 1992, when journalist Ted Gupp revealed its existence in the Washington Post. That space has since been repurposed as a historical exhibit. Visitors today can walk through the long concrete corridors and austere bunk rooms, which is a sobering reminder of how close the world came to needing such a place. The only clues, if one knows exactly where to look, are the oversized service entrances and a few oddly located exhaust grates tucked behind some hedgerows. It is a textbook example of a structure that was built not just to conceal something, but to erase it from all external detection. Number 14. America's secret emergency government facility, Mount Weather. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, there's a facility so secretive that its name wasn't publicly acknowledged by the US government for decades. It's called Mount Weather. It's not just a bunker, it's an underground city. It's located near Berryville, Virginia. This Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center has long been at the heart of the nation's continuity of government planning. It was constructed in the 1950s during the Cold War, and it's remained a cornerstone of U.S. national security infrastructure ever since. Although the site was known to intelligence communities and insiders for decades, the public only became widely aware of it in 1974, when a plane crash on the mountain inadvertently exposed its existence. In the years that followed, journalists and researchers pieced together bits of information, but official confirmation was rare. Documents leaked by Freedom of Information requests and whistleblowers eventually painted a clearer picture of what Mount Weather contained, including the ability to house hundreds of federal workers, a self-contained communication system that could broadcast emergency updates, and a version of every major federal department's leadership hierarchy ready to assume command. Mount Weather still plays an ongoing role in FEMA's disaster response operations, and it's likely evolved significantly since its Cold War heyday. Well, despite the updates, the purpose remains the same: survival, secrecy, and functionality. It blends in with the surrounding forest, and it makes it nearly invisible to both the public and foreign surveillance systems. In the world of government secrecy, Mount Weather is still one of the most successful examples of a structure built not just to survive, but to remain hidden even while active. Number 13. A hidden escape route for U.S. presidents, the secret train platform beneath the Waldorf Astoria. In the heart of Manhattan, beneath one of the most iconic hotels, lies a private railway platform that doesn't appear on public transit maps. Known as Track 61, this underground platform was built as part of New York City's Grand Central Terminal network, but eventually came to serve a far more secretive function. Hidden beneath the luxurious Waldorf Astoria Hotel, Track 61 became a private transit access point for the rich, the powerful, and at times the President of the United States. Originally constructed in the 1930s, the track and its elevator shaft were part of an effort to provide elite guests with discreet access to the hotel. Roosevelt, paralyzed from polio, used the track to enter and exit New York without revealing his physical location to the public. His specially modified armored train car would arrive at Track 61, and from there an industrial elevator capable of lifting the entire rail car would carry it and the president directly into the basement of the Waldorf Astoria. This allowed him to bypass public scrutiny entirely, avoiding cameras and crowds. And while the platform was rarely used in the decades following Roosevelt's presidency, it remained functional and ready. It's rumored that the platform was retained as part of the U.S. government's continuity and evacuation planning well into the Cold War. The platform was also reportedly kept on standby during George W. Bush's visits to the city after 9/11. Track 61 is now largely abandoned, but it still exists, largely untouched beneath the bustling city streets. Occasionally it draws some attention when artists gain access to document its eerily preserved space, complete with aging light fixtures, faded signs, and the outline of the massive elevator that once lifted presidential rail cars to street level. Number 12. A city beneath Portland built to move people in secret, the Shanghai Tunnels. Beneath the city streets of Portland, Oregon, is a sprawling network of underground passageways known as the Shanghai Tunnels. Originally, it was constructed in the mid-19th century to serve a practical commercial purpose. These tunnels were designed to connect the basements of waterfront businesses with the Willamette River's docks, allowing goods to be moved discreetly and efficiently beneath the city. Over time, though, the tunnels developed a far more secretive reputation. As Portland grew into a major port city, stories emerged of the tunnels being used for not just cargo, but for human trafficking. Specifically, the kidnapping of able-bodied men who were drugged, dragged underground, and forced into labor aboard outbound ships. That practice is known as Shanghaiing, and it's what ultimately gave the tunnels their infamous name. Now, structurally, the tunnels span several blocks, linking businesses, hotels, and facilities, and many entrances were sealed off by the mid-20th century due to safety. And while official records are pretty sparse, archaeological investigations have uncovered narrow brick corridors, ventilation shafts, holding areas, and iron-barred cells, lending weight to the darker parts of the legend. What makes the tunnel significant is the context in how an entirely public-facing city was layered over an intentionally hidden network of passageways. These weren't just storm drains or abandoned basements, they were purpose-built for movement in the shadows. A city beneath a city, operating for decades as a secret artery of vice and commerce. Number 11. A Russian fortress buried beneath the mountain, the Yamantau Mountain Complex. Within the Ural Mountains of central Russia is Mount Yamantau, a location that's attracted some curiosity and speculation. Constructed by the Russian government under a veil of secrecy that rivaled any Cold War-era operation, this complex is widely considered to be a massive underground city, complete with infrastructure to support thousands of people for extended periods. Construction is believed to have started in the late 1970s or early 80s, though satellite imagery from the 90s shows a significant acceleration of development. The United States first started raising concerns about this place in 1996 when high-resolution satellite images revealed extensive tunneling. Inquiries by the U.S. State Department were met with vague or conflicting responses. Russian officials alternately described the site as a mining operation, a food storage facility, a repository for Russian cultural artifacts, and a location for national disaster. Well, despite the lack of clarity, defense analysts around the world have pieced together a fairly compelling picture of what it really is. The complex is believed to be part of Russia's strategic continuity of government system. The site's protected by multiple layers of security, including restricted airspace, armed checkpoints, and classified rail lines. And unlike many other military bunkers, this one's notable for the fact that it was built long after the Cold War had supposedly ended, at a time when Russia was economically struggling and much of its military infrastructure was in decay. That continued investment has fueled further speculation that it plays a critical role in their strategic defense posture even today. Even so, the bulk of the complex remains invisible from above. Its true scale is buried under thousands of feet of rock beyond the reach of optical imaging. It's an example of a modern structure designed to not only hide what it contains, but even the fact that it exists at all. Number 10. The AT&T Long Lines building. On the southern skyline of Manhattan, the building at 33 Thomas Street stands out in a city that's known for its variety. A 29-story windowless skyscraper with brutalist concrete facades and virtually no external decoration. It looks less like an office tower and more like an urban fortress. For decades, New Yorkers have speculated about its purpose. Some believed it housed military technology, others assumed it was a nuclear shelter. The truth, however, may be even more extraordinary. Officially constructed in the early 1970s as a hardened telephone switching center for AT&T, this building now stands at the center of allegations that it served, and may still serve, as a clandestine hub for the National Security Agency. The building was completed in 1974 to support the infrastructure needs of the AT&T Long Lines department. That's the division responsible for managing long-distance voice and data service. The structure has no windows, which minimizes vulnerabilities. It's made of reinforced concrete, built to withstand a nuclear blast, and includes massive mechanical systems that allow it to operate independently for up to 2 weeks without external power or water. But what was once thought to be simply an unusually secure telecom hub took on new meaning following the revelations made by Edward Snowden in 2013. Among the cache of NSA documents released was evidence pointing to a secret NSA surveillance operation called Titan Point, with multiple references to a mysterious facility in New York that matched the specs of 33 Thomas Street. In the documents, it identified the building as Site Number 4, a hub where the NSA worked in cooperation with AT&T to tap into international phone calls, internet traffic, and VoIP data as it passed through major fiber optic switches. The NSA's alleged activities inside this building is pretty big. According to reporting, the site was used to intercept satellite signals, gain access to underground fiber optic cables, and house equipment that filtered, copied, and transferred data directly to intelligence databases. But what makes the structure remarkable is how deliberately nondescript and functionally imposing it is. The building's facade is entirely blank except for ventilation slits. There's no signage for AT&T, there's no windows, there's no street-facing lobby, only a single secured doorway that offers access to the interior. And it operates mostly autonomously. It features 12 diesel generators, multiple backup fuel tanks, ventilation systems, and Faraday shielding. For years, the building was mostly invisible to the public, but following those Snowden leaks, renewed scrutiny began to surface. Its existence has never been formally confirmed by the NSA, nor has it been denied. AT&T remains silent on its current use, maintaining that the building continues to serve essential telecom functions, which is technically true. And yet the combination of its features, classified references, and functional design make it clear. This is a building deliberately constructed to hide something, not behind walls, but within them. Number 9. A theme park that was built to hide its own inner workings. The Disneyland Utilidor System. Beneath the joyful music, the colorful parades, and the perfectly orchestrated magic of Walt Disneyland's Magic Kingdom lies a hidden infrastructure few visitors ever see. It's known as the Utilidor System. It's a sprawling complex that forms the secret circulatory system of the park, allowing Disney cast members, operational staff, and logistical machinery to operate seamlessly, all out of view from guests. The Utilidors are one of the most ambitious hidden structures ever built, and they exist solely to hide everything that makes the Magic Kingdom work. The idea for the Utilidors came directly from Walt Disney himself. After opening Disneyland in California in 1955, he became frustrated when he saw a Frontierland cowboy walking through Tomorrowland, a moment that shattered the immersive experience he had worked so hard to create. When planning the Magic Kingdom in Florida, he designed it with that concept in mind, to be completely invisible, literally placing the theme park on the second story and building the entire park's operational core underneath it. Opened in 1971, the Magic Kingdom was built using a technique known as a platform build. Instead of digging downwards, engineers built up, creating an artificial hill and pouring a concrete slab known as the first floor, upon which the entire park would be constructed. Every aspect of the park's operation is funneled through the Utilidor. Trash is removed via a system called an AVAC, an automated vacuum-assisted collection, a series of high-powered pneumatic tubes that whisk garbage to a central processing area. Now, what makes it remarkable is that the entire purpose is to stay hidden. Guests walk on elevated streets and pathways that appear completely grounded in reality, unaware that just beneath their feet is a humming city of people, machines, and communications. Despite being underground, they're not dank or cramped. They're fully air-conditioned, brightly lit, and maintained to the same standards as the guest areas. Over time, the system has expanded to support changing technology, too. There are rumors of biometric scanning, guest movement tracking, and live analytics down there. Only a limited number of guests have ever seen this system, mostly through exclusive behind-the-scenes tours like Keys to the Kingdom. Even then, photography is prohibited, the secrecy intentional, and the utilidors are not part of the show. They are the show's backbone. Number 8. The Swiss National Redoubt, a countrywide network of fortresses built to disappear into the Alps. During the Cold War, Switzerland, a famously neutral nation, undertook one of the most ambitious military engineering projects in European history, the creation of the Swiss National Redoubt. This wasn't a single structure but a network of over 26,000 hidden military installations, tunnels, fortresses, weapon caches, and bunkers, built with one clear purpose: to hide an entire army and command structure in case of invasion. If the Swiss lowlands were ever invaded, the plan was for the country's military, government, and national gold reserves to retreat into fortified mountain zones that were almost impossible to conquer, and where counterattacks could be launched indefinitely. These strongholds were so carefully integrated into the landscape they were almost invisible. Gun emplacements hidden behind sliding rock panels, artillery hidden inside fake barns, and command bunkers disguised as alpine chalets. Perhaps the most well-known installation was Fortress Führingen, which included anti-tank bunkers, underground barracks, and artillery, all concealed by sliding stone doors, completely hidden until activated. There were even underground airfields where Swiss fighter jets could taxi through tunnels and launch from hidden hangars. By the late 1980s, roughly 20% of Switzerland's national road tunnels had been designed to double as military airstrips or weapons platforms. Even Swiss hospitals had emergency wings that could convert into triage centers in case of nuclear attack. The legacy of the redoubt is still visible today in the form of mountain slopes that hide more than meets the eye. A remote chalet might still conceal a blast door. A hiking trail might pass a flat rock face that for decades served as a camouflage panel for anti-aircraft guns. It was not a single hidden fortress. It was an entire nation that was built to vanish into the mountains and defend itself from within. Moving on to number 7, the Ministry for State Security, Germany. In East Berlin during the Cold War, among the ordinary streets of the Lichtenberg district, stood a massive complex that outwardly looked like a cluster of dull office buildings. But these buildings belonged to the Stasi, one of the most feared and secretive intelligence organizations in modern history. What made the Stazzi Headquarters so extraordinary wasn't the size or even the purpose. It was how deliberately unremarkable its design was. The structure was built to conceal its identity in plain sight, camouflaging one of the most powerful surveillance engines in history as just another block of socialist-era bureaucracy. Covering about 23 buildings spread over 20 acres, the complex housed over 8,000 full-time Stasi employees by the 1980s. But despite the enormous scale and influence of this institution, the buildings had no visible security fencing, no extravagant guard towers, and no obvious signage indicating that this was the nerve center. The Stasi relied on psychological invisibility. If no one suspected that the most feared secret police operated just across the street, they were less likely to ask questions. The main building at Normanenstrasse became a symbolic and actual heart of this empire. It was here that Erich Mielke, the head of the Stasi from 1957 to 89, maintained a heavily secure top-floor office, lined with maps, encryption equipment, and a direct line to the East German leadership. By the time the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the Stasi had files on more than 6 million East Germans, about a third of the country's population. Their headquarters remained protected and guarded until citizens stormed the building in late 1989 and early 1990, preventing mass destruction of records. And in the years that followed, the facility was turned into the Stasi Museum, a living monument to the scale of internal surveillance, and a permanent reminder of how something so enormous could be hidden in plain sight by design. Number 6. A secret missile base hidden beneath Greenland, Project Iceworm. In the late 1950s, during the height of the Cold War, the United States began secretly building a huge network of tunnels beneath Greenland. Officially, the project was called Camp Century, a research station established by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in partnership with Denmark. But the real purpose of the project was much more ambitious and highly classified. Known internally as Project Iceworm, it was a plan to conceal hundreds of medium-range nuclear missiles in mobile launchers beneath the ice. At the surface, Camp Century was sold to the public and the Danish government as a remote polar research outpost. Built about 150 miles inland from the coast, the camp included a lab, power generation systems, and living quarters for over 200 people. The facility was constructed inside of a network of trenches that were dug into the snow and covered with steel arches, forming tunnels over 1,000 meters long. Over time, these tunnels were to serve as a proof of concept infrastructure for a much larger missile grid, a huge, constantly shifting array of launch platforms embedded across a projected 52,000 square mile zone. The genius of the project, though, was the stealth. The missiles stored on tracks beneath the ice could be moved frequently so that no foreign intelligence agency could ever know their exact location. On paper, it was one of the most innovative nuclear concealment strategies. But the project quickly ran into logistical problems. The Greenland ice sheet, once thought to be stable, proved to be in constant motion. The tunnels began collapsing under pressure, shifting ice distorted the alignment, and the nuclear reactor, while technically functional, caused internal tension with Danish authorities. By 1966, the Pentagon quietly shut the project down. The missile deployment never happened, and the nuclear reactor was dismantled and removed. Camp Century's buried remains may resurface one day, including toxic and radioactive contaminants. What was once meant to be the most secure missile platform in the world may now become a slow-moving environmental hazard. Project Iceworm was declassified in the 1990s, and it stunned historians and environmental scientists alike. Denmark, which hadn't been informed of the missile plan, expressed some outrage. The legacy of Iceworm serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of secrecy, especially when the structure designed to hide something sits on top one of the most dynamic systems on Earth. Number 5. The U.S. Bullion Depository at Fort Knox. So few buildings in the United States are more mythologized, more cloaked in secrecy, or more heavily protected than the U.S. Bullion Depository at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Known simply as Fort Knox in popular culture, this facility is not just a high-security vault. It is a purpose-built fortress designed to store and conceal a massive portion of the United States gold reserves. But more than protecting gold, the structure was engineered to project an aura of invulnerability and to hide the full scope of what lies inside. Completed in 1936 at the height of the Great Depression, the depository was built in response to a rapidly growing national gold stockpile. Following Executive Order 6102, which required Americans to exchange most of their gold for paper money, the U.S. Treasury suddenly needed a secure place to store thousands of tons of bullion. Fort Knox, a remote military base in Kentucky, was chosen for its isolation, defensibility, and existing Army presence. The building is constructed with steel-reinforced concrete walls that are 4 feet thick and a roof designed to withstand aerial bombardment. The vault door weighs 20 tons. Even the President of the United States can't open the vault without approval and coordinated action from the U.S. Mint and Treasury. Inside the vault, an estimated 147 million troy ounces of gold, more than 4,500 metric tons, are stored in stackable gold bars weighing 400 ounces each. Now, part of the secrecy stems from a deliberate policy. The U.S. Treasury rarely allows visitors, and only one tour has ever been granted to members of the press in 1974, when a group of journalists, congressmen, and future Senator Mitch McConnell were allowed inside. They confirmed the presence of gold, but were not permitted to examine all the vault compartments. Since then, the building has remained entirely off-limits to the public, reinforcing its mystique. In recent years, the concept of physical bullion storage has evolved a bit, with many nations opting for digital reserves or overseas diversification, but Fort Knox remains the symbolic heart of America's financial credibility. Its role in deterring theft, invasion, or economic panic has arguably become more psychological than functional. Still, the structure endures, immovable and unyielding. silently fulfilling its original mandate: hide the gold and protect it at all costs. Number 4. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York. At first glance, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York looks like any other historic building in Lower Manhattan, a grand neoclassical structure completed in 1924, with limestone walls, arched windows, and a stately presence. But what most people don't realize is that hidden beneath this building, 80 feet below street level and 50 feet below sea level, lies the largest known gold vault in the world. Built with meticulous attention to secrecy and security, this vault houses the gold reserves of not just the United States, but also those of dozens of foreign nations, international organizations, and central banks. It's a building that was constructed to conceal an entire global financial infrastructure beneath one of the world's busiest neighborhoods. The vault was designed from the start to serve a dual purpose: to provide impenetrable physical security and maintain absolute discretion. Gold was moved into the facility in the early 20th century as part of the growing need for central banks to consolidate. The vault is carved directly into the bedrock of Manhattan, protected by a 90-ton steel cylinder door and a series of interlocking security systems. Entry requires multiple credentials, biometric scans, and rotational personnel authorizations. Even once inside the bank, few employees are granted access to the vault floor. The gold in there is stored in narrow vault compartments, stacked in racks by country of origin. Though ownership remains with the depositors, the Federal Reserve acts as a custodian. At its peak, the vault stored over 12,000 metric tons of gold, and today it still holds roughly 6,000 metric tons. That's more than Fort Knox. And yet the average New Yorker walking by 33 Liberty Street has no idea what's beneath their feet. The placement of the vault was deliberate. By anchoring it into the bedrock, engineers ensured resistance against flooding, earthquakes, and tunneling. The building contained advanced systems to detect any vibration, heat signatures, and air pressure changes, and that was designed to make covert entry functionally impossible. In an era where wealth is increasingly abstracted in digital currency and decentralized assets, the vault at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York remains one of the most tangible and secretive repositories of value on Earth. Number 3. A massive hydroelectric project built to hide military intentions: the Banshow Dam. At first glance, the Banshow Dam in Henan Province in China appeared to be a symbol of progress, an ambitious piece of civil engineering constructed to tame flooding, provide electricity, and irrigate farmland for millions. Completed in 1950, it was the cornerstone of the People's Republic of China's early push into modernization and infrastructure development. But what few people outside the highest ranks of the Chinese Communist Party understood at the time was that the Banshow Dam was also built to hide something much darker: its dual purpose as a covert military tool, part of a secretive network of hydropower infrastructure intended not only to generate energy, but to be used as a form of strategic flood control with military potential. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, Chinese military doctrine quietly evolved to consider water warfare as a viable strategic option. The Yellow River had been deliberately flooded in 1938 by Chiang Kai-shek's Nationalist Army to slow the Japanese invasion, a move that killed hundreds of thousands of people. That precedent was not forgotten. Infrastructure like Banshow was not seen as just an engineering feat, but as a covert weapon, one hidden in plain sight under the banner of public utility. Construction started in 1951, and it was completed by 1952 with 120 spillway gates and a reinforced concrete design. However, due to political pressure during the Great Leap Forward, engineers were ordered to accelerate the construction, reduce safety tolerances, and cut corners on material and labor, all while maintaining the illusion of technological excellence. Then, in August 1975, the hidden truth of Banshow's vulnerability exploded, literally. That month, Typhoon Nina struck central China, dropping a year's worth of rain in just a few days. The Banshow's reservoir reached critical levels, and the dam's operators requested emergency releases to lower the pressure. But with the political climate still prioritizing appearances over safety, higher authorities refused to grant release orders until it was too late. On the night of August 8, 1975, the dam failed catastrophically, releasing 700 million cubic meters of water in a matter of hours. What followed was one of the most devastating dam collapses in human history. A massive wall of water roared down the Hua River basin, wiping out entire villages, destroying crops and overwhelming smaller downstream dams like a chain of falling dominoes. Over 170,000 people were killed by the flood and its aftereffects. Although official numbers were suppressed for decades, millions were left homeless, and disease and famine followed. In later years, international watchdog groups and disaster historians began to uncover what had been hidden for decades. Declassified planning documents revealed that it had been integrated into a military contingency plan during the 1960s. Satellite imagery and recovered blueprints showed that its spillways were oversized for normal use, but ideal for rapid water-based disruption. The Ministry of State Security had monitored engineers working on the dam to prevent leaks, not of water, but of classified purpose. Today, it has been rebuilt but to a much smaller scale, and it's now one of the many dams in a much larger hydrological grid. But the lesson of the original dam remains buried, both literally and politically. What the world saw as a beacon of infrastructure was, in truth, a strategic tool cloaked in civilian garb. Number 2. The Berlin Wall's Ghost Stations, subway stations built to hide a divided city. Between 1961 and 1989, the city of Berlin was physically and ideologically split in two by one of the most infamous structures in modern history, the Berlin Wall. But while the world fixated on the concrete barriers, guard towers, and barbed wire, few people realized that another division was taking place underground. Beneath the city, in the labyrinth of the U-Bahn and S-Bahn train networks, were a series of stations that became known as ghost stations. These were real, fully constructed subway stations that trains passed through daily, but no one was allowed to enter or exit there. They were sealed off, darkened, guarded, and left to rot beneath the surface. To understand this, you need to understand Berlin's unique situation after World War II. Although the city of Berlin lay entirely within Soviet-controlled East Germany, it was itself divided among the four Allied powers: the US, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union. This resulted in West Berlin becoming a democratic enclave within communist East Germany. Over time, ideological differences hardened, and the border became increasingly fortified. In 1961, East Germany constructed the Berlin Wall to prevent East Berliners from fleeing to the West. That was a desperate move to stop the massive brain drain of its population. Instead of rerouting an entire train network, a logistically and economically infeasible task, the East German government implemented a plan to allow the West Berlin trains to pass through East Berlin territory without stopping. Thus, the ghost stations were born. A total of 16 of them were created across East Berlin. They were fully constructed stations with platforms, tiled walls, signage, ticket booths, and all the trappings of a typical Berlin stop, but they were transformed into sealed, lifeless voids. The psychological effect of these ghost stations was pretty profound. For West Berliners, they were a chilling reminder that parts of their city were physically unreachable, not just politically restricted, but consciously erased. For East Berliners, they represented spaces that once belonged to them but were now forbidden, dead zones left in bureaucratic limbo. Perhaps the most iconic of these ghost stations was Nordbahnhof, which was once a bustling interchange. After 1961, it was stripped of signs and its entrances were sealed. It became a time capsule, essentially functioning as a station without a function, preserved purely as a symbol of absence. Other stations underwent similar transformations. One East Berlin train conductor later recalled that the ghost stations were the most psychologically difficult part of the job. Every day he passed through a part of the city that was just frozen in time, like where life had been paused by decree. All of this changed with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. As East and West reconnected, efforts were made to reintegrate the ghost stations into the unified city's network. It took years to clean, repair, and modernize these stations. But the ghost stations remained one of the most poignant reminders of the Cold War, not just because they were hidden, but because they were so deliberately hidden in the ordinary. Today, many of these former stations feature exhibits or plaques explaining their past. Visitors can now walk the platforms, wait for trains, and explore what was once forbidden ground. But even in their restored state, something lingers, a sense of the years when they were deliberately erased, built not to carry just passengers, but to hide a fracture in the very soul of a city. Number 1. A remote Australian facility built to hide a global surveillance empire, Pine Gap. In the Australian outback, about 18 kilometers from the town of Alice Springs, sits one of the most secretive, significant intelligence facilities in the world, the Joint Defense Facility at Pine Gap. With the iconic white ray domes, geodesic domes housing satellite dishes, Pine Gap appears, from a distance, like something in science fiction. But this is no research station, and it's not a weather facility. Pine Gap is a critical hub in a sprawling global surveillance infrastructure, one that was designed to remain invisible on purpose. Pine Gap was established in 1966 under an agreement during the height of the Cold War. While it was publicly described as a site for satellite research and tracking, its true purpose, gathering signals intelligence or SIGINT for the U.S., remained classified for decades. From the very beginning, its architecture, location, and operational procedures were deliberately shaped to ensure that almost no one outside a select group of American and Australian officials would even know what happened there. Geographically, it is one of the most strategically placed stations on Earth, located exactly at the center of the Australian continent. It's ideally positioned for tracking satellites as they pass over the Eastern Hemisphere. The structures themselves are subdued. There's no towering buildings, no helipads or runways, and no public signage. It consists of low-profile structures, many of which are built partially below ground or shielded with earth berms to minimize thermal signatures. And inside Pine Gap, U.S. and Australian personnel work together, though not necessarily with equal authority. Most operational control remains in the American hands, under agencies like the CIA, NSA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, or the NRO. The Australians have a presence and nominal oversight, but many systems operate under levels of classification to which even senior Australian officials don't have access. According to some documents released by Edward Snowden in 2013, Pine Gap has collected massive quantities of metadata, the who, where, and when of global communications, through the interception of satellite and microwave transmissions. This facility is deeply integrated into the Five Eyes intelligence alliance that includes the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. This alliance shares intelligence collected globally, often without the knowledge or consent of the citizens whose data is swept up in the process. All this secrecy has led to growing unease within Australian civil society. Protests have happened outside the base, led by peace activists, indigenous rights groups, and civil liberty advocates. In 2016, a group of Catholic peace activists entered the restricted zone in protest, leading to a rare public trial where the court was forced to hear, under limited terms, evidence of the base's connection to drone warfare. Well, despite all the concerns, Pine Gap continues to expand. While the hardware evolves, the core purpose remains unchanged. Pine Gap is a place designed not just to collect data, but to do so from the shadows, a structure whose greatest strength is in what's not said about it. Locals know it's there, but few know anyone who works inside. There are no public archives, no annual reports, and no media releases. It is a hole in the map, engineered to exist outside of public understanding. It is, perhaps, the ultimate example of a structure built to hide something, not just information, but the very existence of an architecture of global surveillance, engineered to leave no visible trace.